How cool is that? DICE added a hidden katana to the Devastation map after update 6.2. It's one of those little ninja changes that doesn't often make it into the patch notes. All you've got to do is hit the supply drop that's stuck in the wrecked wood of the cathedral roof, and the katana will fall right onto the ground where it's yours to pick up. And actually, it was mentioned a while back that DICE might have been planning to add some of those pickup weapons to the older European maps. Of course, they arrived with the Pacific update. So this might have been one of those ways that DICE planned to do it, but this feels more like a little hidden secret or an Easter egg rather than a proper pickup. But on to the topic of today's video, which is still kind of about hidden stuff, but this time we're talking about hidden stuff in the game files after update 6.2. This stuff is kind of going to give us some idea of DICE's plans for the future of Battlefield 5. It's become apparent to most of the regular players of this game at the moment that DICE hasn't released any info on what's happening with the game after the middle of Chapter 6. 7 weeks were populated for the Tides of War alongside the release of Chapter 6, so that was the Solomon Islands map, the 3 new weapons, and the 2 new gadgets. But beyond that, DICE has basically said nothing about the rest of Chapter 6, and then potentially beyond that into the future as well. Based on some of this data mined info that I've got for you today, however, which is of course to be taken with our regular pinch of salt, none of this is confirmed, this is all taken in progress from the files, but we know that DICE is starting to build out content and items behind the scenes. So first of all then, a brand new weapon has been located in the files by data miner Temporyal, the M1941 Johnson rifle. Now this was developed by an American, Melvin Johnson, prior to the start of World War II, and he campaigned heavily for the rifle to be adopted by the US forces, but ultimately he was unsuccessful. The Johnson rifle was considered by many to be a massive competitor to the M1 Garand, but that weapon won out. That was the rifle that the US forces adopted in huge numbers. Now the Johnson featured a 10-round rotary magazine designed to be used with the same 5-round stripper clips used by the M1903 Springfield rifle, so that saved a little bit on the cost of developing a new ammo feeding system, and it had 2 more rounds of space in its magazine compared to the M1 Garand. And you could recharge the magazine at any time with additional ammunition, which is something the Garand didn't allow for. Certain soldiers stated they preferred the Johnson rifle also because it didn't make that loud pinging noise when it was out of ammunition, which is something the Garand did when the last round was fired and the on-block clip was ejected. Some soldiers thought that enemies might hear that ping and then they would rush them knowing that they were in the middle of a reload. The Marine Corps pushed heavily for the adoption of the Johnson rifle, but with the US Army already heavily investing in the Garand, it didn't make sense to adopt another rifle, so the Johnson ended up losing out. But there are examples of the weapon being used by US forces in the Pacific. Captain Robert Hugo Dunlap carried a Johnson rifle into combat in the Battle of Iwo Jima in 1945, and he was awarded a Medal of Honor for his actions in that battle. And before he died, apparently, he praised the weapon and credited it with saving his own life and the lives of many others. So it's got a lasting legacy, to say the least. Now, having stated that the weapon was used by small numbers of American forces in the Pacific, the Johnson then would be a great candidate to add into Battlefield 5 at the moment. Being semi-automatic, competing with the Garand, it would likely slot into the assault class, but at the moment, the only evidence we have that the weapon is ready for use is the screenshot in the thumbnail and the one that I'm showing you on the screen. Apparently, it does work properly, but there doesn't appear to be any sort of date that we can go on for this right now. But the fact that it can be used in-game would suggest to me that it's fairly close to launch. Sticking with weapons now, some new assets have arrived for other weapons that we've discussed in the past. The M3 infrared sniper carbine, a converted M2 carbine with a gigantic infrared optic on top of it, that now has dog tags made for it in the files, which suggests the weapon is nearer completion. And then the Doppelschuss, which is a double-barrel flare gun capable of firing sticky flares, that also has dog tags for it completed as well. Now, according to Tempoyal, the M3 sniper carbine, that's still a work in progress at the moment, so it's unlikely to arrive in Battlefield 5 without another patch to get it into shape. But the Doppelschuss is a weapon that we've already seen example videos for. We did that in a previous video, and that suggests that it could become a new unlockable gadget in the second half of Chapter 6. The Doppelschuss can fire flares and can attach them to vehicles and environmental objects, but you can't stick them to friendly or enemy players, which, admittedly, is a bit of a shame. This means that if you wanted to, you could stick it to the back of a Jeep, and then you could ride that Jeep across the map, and it would ping off enemy locations as you drove through if they were close enough to the Jeep. So, definitely more of a sandbox gadget than some others that we've seen. There's also a small mention here for the LAD LMG, or the LAD light machine gun, a weapon that we covered a very long time back now, but this is set to become a Soviet weapon in Battlefield 5, and it's been tagged with USSR, which gives us more evidence that DICE is working on something Russian for Battlefield 5. Within the files, there are lots of sound references to the reload of the weapon, so all of the different noises that DICE combines together to make the smooth sounds that we hear in-game when we reload the weapon. So it looks like the weapon is being worked on for some sort of future release, and if that's the case, then I'm going to predict here that it's some sort of Eastern Front update during 2020 that will bring the Russians into the game fighting against the Germans. That's really where I want to see Battlefield 5 go anyway after the Pacific. I think it makes sense, so with one of these weapons potentially already being worked on, that could be quite interesting. Then there are some other new gadgets that are mentioned. We have the Bangalore Torpedo and the Type 99 Mine. Now, the Bangalore Torpedo, often just referred to as the Banger, which is a brilliant nickname, that was made to help clear paths through wired obstacles and heavy undergrowth, apparently. They saw action during World War I, as well as World War II and beyond, and in World War I, the British used them in the Battle of Cambrai in 1917, and they were trying to distract the enemy from where the real action was happening, to try and draw troops away to a different location. In Battlefield 5, I could see this becoming useful during maybe some kind of iconic beach landing, where you had to try and work your way through spools of barbed wire. I wonder which beach landing that could possibly be. Then the Type 99 mine, this to me just looks like a straight cosmetic upgrade to the current mines that we already have access to, but maybe they would just be distributed by the Japanese faction instead. One interesting thing about this mine, however, they could be stacked on top of each other with magnets, which would obviously make the explosion bigger every time you put a different mine on top of the next one, but whether that makes it into Battlefield 5, I'm not really sure. I'm just seeing this more as a Japanese version of the mine that we already have. And then there were also mentions added to the files with Update 6.2 that point towards a potential future release for the Einstos Flammenwerfer, which is a single-use handheld flamethrower. Dog tag data was added to the game for it, so that could mean the gadget is being lined up for a release later down the line when the war, maybe, returns to a European setting, because it is a German creation. Next up, we have some interesting items of tank body customization to show you. Safe to say the options that the feature launched with weren't quite what people were expecting. They did lack quite a bit of presence in some cases. But if you remember, I did report on Jeff Braddock, Community Manager, stating that DICE was working on some adaptive options for the tanks. Well, Tempoyal has unearthed some of those in his latest data mining spree. This one is called Big Game Hunter, and it's for the Panzer IV tank, and you can see it's much more established in its presence. It's covered in leaves and it's got wood panels on the side and some logs as well, and honestly, I think it looks pretty awesome here. This look is based on the Citadel paint job underneath the turret and the chassis, and that paint changes the standard leaves into winter-themed conifer twigs, which, if you were playing on the Narvik map, for example, that'd fit perfectly into that setting. And then there's this second one, which is called Swarm Leader for the Type 97. The chassis and the turret, they're dressed in camo nets and barbed wire. I'm not sure if any of that changes depending on the map, but like all other tanks, it does change the colour of the items on top of it if you change the paint underneath. So if you wanted to just go for a factory look, but you wanted some camo nets on there, then everything would be green. But as you can see here, this has got one of the more vibrant paints on it, and that changes the colour of the camo nets. And then lastly for today, we have some new soldier outfit sets to look at. This set here features shorts for the American faction, which includes Squared Away as the common option, Troubleshooter as the rare option, and Tried and True for the epic set. And I think these were featured in the Chapter 6 trailer for the game, along with those Japanese Bush Wookiee outfits that they were wearing. And then we do have some Japanese options as well, but they aren't the Bush Wookiee outfits, so you can stop getting excited. We've got High Tide here as the basic option, Sentinel as the rare option, and Arashi as the epic option. So plenty of stuff in the works for Battlefield 5, it seems. Remember, none of this is confirmed to come to the game until EA or DICE say it is, or you see it released in the game. That's always a good expectation for you to have. But thanks very much for watching. Leave me a rating and a comment. It is much appreciated. And I'll catch you guys in the next one.